Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out on this cold, dark February evening, and welcome to all those who are joining us online as well. It is an absolute thrill to welcome Evie Shockley to campus for a reading tonight, and to have her kick off an absolutely stellar lineup of poets for our spring season this semester. I was thinking about today, sometimes poets come to campus and we have an evening of really wonderful poetry, and that is no small thing. And then sometimes you know a poet is coming and they are there in the offing on the schedule, and you absolutely cannot wait for them to get here, and it feels like a visceral need that we have this poet on our campus. I feel that way with Evie tonight. In this moment, I could not be more grateful that she is here. Let's just welcome Evie, first of all. Yeah. I think we need Evie Shockley poems tonight. I just have a few announcements before we get started. So in a few minutes, I'll turn things over to my amazing colleague, Melissa Parrish, who will be introducing Evie. Then following Evie's reading, she'll be in conversation with the equally amazing Yona Harvey. And yes, woot for both. And after that conversation, there'll be a book signing. Evie will be right over here. You probably saw coming in, but shout out to our friends at Broadside Books who are selling Evie's books. Yes, just independent booksellers as well. Please pick up, several of Evie's books are for sale back there. Do yourself a favor and pick up this absolutely stunning and amazing collection. It will be for sale afterwards as well, and Evie will be here. I also want to say, if you aren't able to buy a book or don't have your book with you and you just want to come by and say hello to Evie, just come by and say hello. We've got postcards in the back of Evie's work. Pick up postcards, just come by and say hi. That means a lot as well. I also want to thank, I'm really proud to have and thank the following co-sponsors for tonight's event. I'm going to lead with the Office for Equity and Inclusion, who sponsored tonight. Yeah. Also the Program for the Study of Women, Gender, and Sexuality in the Department of English Language and Literature, also co-sponsored tonight. So we want to thank everyone who contributed to getting the word out. I want to just take a moment to publicly thank Jen Blackburn, the Poetry Center's Program and Outreach Coordinator. Jen did such an amazing and incredible amount of work to help keep our poetry ship afloat while I was away last semester. So Jen, thank you. Where's Jen? Oh, right there. Thank you so much. I need to thank the BDPC's core interns, Rhea and Kylie, who have been working hard to promote tonight's reading, as well as all of our upcoming events this spring, accompanied by a steady soundtrack of Stevie Nicks. So we are grateful for all the work, and others, but all the work that they have done. If you are watching this reading online, that is due to the work of Tom Kleitis in the back. So thank you, Tom, for streaming tonight's event. I want to thank Tiana Clark for being born on this day, because it gives me an opportunity to wish Tiana Clark a very happy birthday. There she is in the back. Everyone should go up and give her birthday wishes afterwards, too. So my English 112 students are here for the class. This is the first time we've done this as an event sign-in for the readings for the class. So there will be QR codes that will be posted at the end of the event. You can find those codes posted around. Also, Emma will have QR codes. If you have any kind of technical difficulties with the QR codes, you can come and see me, but Emma will also have one of the hard copy cheat sheets, and you can just sign your name in there too. So please let me know if you have any issues, but they will be posted. Don't worry, on the doors up here, they'll be around. Please remember to silence your cell phones. We have many wonderful readings and events coming up over the next few weeks. If you're interested, there is a postcard with all of our core readings listed on it. You can pick that up on the way out. And you can also, if you're not on our mailing list and you want to stay up to date, you can also just sign a QR code and be added to our mailing list, and then you won't miss out on any of our events. Closest in the offing, we have an event with Floyd Chung, who edited the anthology Literature of Japanese American Incarceration, which was published with Penguin Classics. So Floyd will be reading from this collection and discussing his work on assembling that book. I hope you can come for that event. It's a really incredible anthology, and it's going to be a wonderful conversation. So if you can attend that, that will be next Wednesday at 4:30, February 19th, in the Poetry Center upstairs. Come early and get a seat and listen to Floyd talk about putting together that book. And then in terms of our own poetry series, 2 weeks from tonight, on February 25th, we'll have poet and essayist Sabrina Ora-Mark will be here, reading from her collection Happily, which is a series of personal essays linked to fairy tales. They're essays that behave like poems. They're really wonderful. I'm really looking forward to that conversation and reading. And then on March 4th, and I should mention, she'll be in conversation with Kelly Link. It's going to be a great dialogue. And on March 4th, the wonderful Kay Ivor will be here reading from their debut collection, short films starring my beloved's Red Bronco. It's really going to be a wonderful series all spring long, but I hope you can join us for those events. And now it's my pleasure to just briefly introduce my colleagues who are going to be leading tonight's event from here. So Yona Harvey is the author of You Don't Have to Go to Mars for Love, winner of the Believer Book in Poetry, and Hemming the Water, her debut collection, winner of the Kate Tufts Discovery Award. Her writing has appeared in numerous publications, including Best American Poetry, Obsidian, Letters to the Future, Black Women/Radical Writing, and also A Poet's Craft, a comprehensive guide to making and sharing your poetry, among many, many, many others. She's the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Japan Creative Artist Fellowship, and the Heinz Foundation's Carol Brown Award. She lives, of course, right here in Northampton, where she is the Tamis Day Professor of Poetry at Smith College. And her third poetry collection is titled, I love this, Season 1, Episode 7. And that is forthcoming in 2026. I cannot wait for that. And then I'll turn things over to Melissa Parrish. Melissa Parrish is an assistant professor of English and affiliated faculty with the American Studies program and the program for the study of women, gender, and sexuality at Smith College. She is completing a book that I also cannot wait for. Situation Normal, it's called, Emergency Poetics and the Rise of the National Security State, which explores the way in which poetry reveals and resists the U.S. national security state's prominent role in shaping state-sponsored emergencies. Stay tuned for that for sure. Please welcome to the stage the amazing Miss Melissa Parrish.
Thanks to whoever said woo. I really appreciate that. Thanks for being here. I'm really delighted and also humbled to introduce Evie Shockley tonight. Evie's the award-winning author of 6 poetry collections, many, many awards, but her most recent book that we're probably going to hear a lot from today, I imagine, is called Suddenly We. And it's a gorgeous meditation that, among many other things, plumbs the depths of the Middle Passage in mournful, but also, using that word meditative again, more meditative courses of action. It's a kind of celestial navigation among the skies and the stars, and also actually snow. I was rereading this book while it was snowing this past weekend, and it was really quite an experience, and there's more snow coming, so you have your chance. Evie's also, of course, an award-winning scholar, and she has written a foundational critical book in Black studies called Renegade Poetics, Black Aesthetics and Formal Innovation in African American Poetry. This book, in Evie's own words, asks the deceptively simple question, quote, what do we mean when we designate as Black certain behaviors, values, or forms of expression? And what are the consequences of doing so? Evie's always attentive to the influence of audience and reception on perceptions of Black cultural and aesthetic expression. She challenges us at every turn to treat matters of aesthetic form with historical nuance. Her subsequent critical work on African American poetic innovation in the work of M. Narvesa Phillip, Douglas Kearney, and Claudia Rankin, among others, will reward multiple readings for anyone interested in literary history, poetry and poetics, and the politics of writing from the margins, And if you're in my classes and we're reading Claudia Rankin Citizen, you will read Evie's work on that book, and it will reward multiple readings. As you can probably tell from this introduction already, Evie is multi-talented, and she's multi-hatted. She is the Zora Neale Hurston Distinguished Professor of English at Rutgers University, where she's the chair of the creative writing program, and she's also the director of the Writers' House. So she's quite busy. I'm really indebted personally to Evie's influence, in fact, because not long ago, I was one of her graduate students. Yeah, an experience I'll not soon forget. In Evie's mentorship, but also in her poetry and in her literary criticism, she's guided so many of us to think more incisively about the intergenerational traumas of structural violence. Specifically, and there's a list, the legacies of chattel slavery and colonization, war, police brutality and mass incarceration, gun violence, income inequality, sexual violence, public health, and climate catastrophe. That's the basic list, but there's more, of course. Doing so, being attentive to all of these violent legacies, is critical for collectively bearing witness to and indeed surviving the many crisis conditions we face. Can we empathize, Evie writes in the poem Cogito Ergo Loquor from Semiautomatic, without taking on the trauma? Unsurprisingly, Evie takes on the forces of trauma in her poetry through wide-ranging formal experiment. She draws our attention to voices, stories, sounds, and palimpsests that complicate the legacies of founding fathers like Thomas Jefferson, literary figures like Melville and T.S. Eliot, and state documents like the Declaration of Independence. A ballad, a dramatic monologue, or a sonnet is just as at home in her work as a concrete poem or a free verse experiment in punctuation, white space, and rearranged text. But don't sleep on the notes at the back of each poetry collection, too. Evie's poems are as citational as they are lyrical, and there's so much to learn from the deep well of references to literature, history, and theory that power everything she writes. But I would be remiss if I didn't also say that I think the intensity of Evie's poetry goes hand in hand with and maybe is even fortified by a razor-sharp playfulness. When Evie takes a magnifying glass to historical crisis, she does so with warmth and with grace, and she refuses to stay still. Steeped in wordplay, no reference ever means just one thing. We must slow down to examine every ode, every letter, even the color blue, from every angle. When we move about Evie's poetry with such care and flexibility, we're rewarded with a joy and sensuality crackling amid despair and disappointment and desire. We can feel it in the trees and in the snow, in wilting bouquets, in good food and wine, with family, with music and art, and with pop culture. There's a little Rihanna in this poetry, and there's a lot of Prince. Evie moves capaciously in her poems, and like the expert teacher I remember so well, she urges us to move with her in the interest of our shared survival. We're lucky indeed to move with her tonight. Please join me again in welcoming Professor Evie Shockley to Smith.
The end. Melissa, thank you so much. I mean, we have graduate students coming through the program all the time, but some are very special to me, and Melissa is one of them for all the reasons that you all know, because you were smart enough to hire her and take her classes and call her colleague. So thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Matt. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Yona, in advance. And thank you all for being here. You could be doing like something else in the snow. Okay, I need to start my timer so I don't keep you longer than you should be kept. Watch is cantankerous. Um, I'm going to read a couple of new poems, and then um, some poems from semiautomatic, Suddenly We, and then a few more new poems to end. But this first poem I want to share, it is very, very fresh. You can share notes with me about possible revisions after the reading if you like. But I knew I needed to write something for my first real reading after a kind of change of regime, shall we say? So here we go. This poem is called This Can't Wait. The day of the radioactive alligator saliva backwash in the national tea arrives, and I wait for Jane Cortez to write a poem, telling us that we can lie down to be buried in a shallow grave of boogers picked from the left nostril of oligarchical boogeymen's and boogie women's regurgitated fascism. Or we can shake off our exquisite draperies of grief, unlace our bruise-inducing corsets of bitterness, and relocate those reserves of cotton-picking grit our ancestors muscled and prayed into inhabitable tomorrows. I wake to find that my country has rededicated itself to living down to the lowest common denominator. And I wait for June Jordan to write a poem telling us that there's nothing new about the arrogance of stupidity, the contagiousness of greed, the brutality of fear, or the profit margin of violence. Nor is there anything new about the wildness of our dreams, the fertility of our imaginations, the strength of our solidarity, or the ferocious beauty of our clasped hands and interlocked fingers like roses blooming outrageous many-hued petals. The sun heaves itself into the sky to sigh over an ordinary day of extraordinary sorrow. And I wait for Lucille Clifton to write a poem, telling us how trouble always shakes off its muddy fur on the clean carpets of our joy. And the most dangerous monsters dress their fangs in designer smiles and tuck their claws beneath cloud-soft down comforters. So we need to bring our six-fingered hands and our planetary hips, our Dahomean grandmothers and our truth-telling tongues to this newest Babylon of blasphemy and set them loose. I open my eyes to a dread sense of the hammer coming down on the auction of our future. And I know the necessary poems can't wait. So I pick up my pen and get to work. Now, if you start that, you might have to keep it up. Just letting you know. Some of my newer poems have been thinking about time in different ways. And this one is one of those. It has an epigraph from the amazing poet Dionne Brand. The epigraph is nothing of her true eloquence, but it was her vocalizing this question or writing this question that brought this poem forth. So I'm citing her anyway, because I cite people. Time, the Nick. And the epigraph is, what is in time? Dionne Brand. Everything and nothing. The ambulance, the apology, the wrinkle, the retrieval. Catastrophe averted is still carried in the bloodstream. Constricted heart, arteries. Cellfuls of could have been collected and held out to community, posterity. The chasing hounds even escaped. Their toothy, growling fury bites the imagination, descended from this danger, nips and holds the skin of then to the now. a bloody fold skewered by an ivory pen. The nick of time, a mark born and reborn, generation after generation. The time nicked, hours, days, years spent in holding the line against deaths, designated, designed, waiting for us. The nick marking the passage of the time of unfreedom on our bodies, passed down as the babies pass through the nick of time opening, bloody, between slick thighs. The rebirth of hope, of will, children stapled by bomb shards to their people's past, some far too late future branded as just in time, are nicked, unnicked, into a world where they must steal back what belongs to them. Everything and nothing. The arrival, the acknowledgement, the reparations, the return. I'm going to shift from newish poems into some poems from Suddenly We, a book that I have been grateful to travel with for these last couple of years. There are, I guess, a couple of ways I've thought about and talk about what this book is doing. I mean, one is perhaps suggested directly by the title, Suddenly We. All of us, right? The suddenly is ironic because there's rarely anything sudden about the formation of solidarity or collectivity. It's often a lot of work, very intentional, that allows us to see our commonalities and work together for shared visions of the future. But, you know, suddenly, maybe something can shock us into joining hands and seeing ourselves as having more in common as earthlings than we have things that divide us. So not to erase difference, but to suggest that difference does not have to be equated with division. That was one of the through lines of this book. Another was my love of visual art, from the cover art, which is by Allison Sarr, amazing LA-based visual artist. She works in sculpture and painting and lithographs and you name it. And so there are a lot of poems in this book that are in conversation with art that helps me think about those things that draw us together and the obstacles to our finding solidarity. So I'm going to start by reading the poem that is a response to this cover piece. You can't see it here probably from where you're sitting, but it's called Bluebird, and there's the bluebird. So my poem in response is called Perched. I am black, comely, a girl on the cusp of desire. My dangling toes take the rest of my body refuses. Fine, upright, my pose proposes anticipation. I poise in copper-colored tension, intent on manifesting my soul in the discouraging world. Under the rough eyes of others, I stiffen. If I must be hard, it will be as a tree, alive with change. Inside me, a love of beauty rises like sap, sprouts from my scalp and stretches forth. I send out my song, an aria blue and feathered, and grow toward it, choirs bare, but soon to bud. I am black and becoming. Thank you. There is a poem in the collection that is dedicated to a former Smith professor, Paula Giddings. I don't know, I suspect students are no longer, of hers are no longer here, but hopefully her legacy remains present on the campus. She wrote an amazing biography of Ida B. Wells Barnett, an anti-lynching crusader, you might say, a woman who fought for suffrage and basically against any kind of injustice she ever came up against. And that biography, it's a doorstopper, but it's well worth the read. And it was the inspiration for this poem and the treasure trove of details for this poem, which is called No Car for Colored Ladies, or Miss Wells Goes Off on the Rails. Memphis, 1883. She wasn't born a hero, you know. Once she was 20, 4 years an orphan, 18 years free. With a passion for Bronte and a weakness for fashion, she might drop a month of her schoolteacher's salary on clothing at Menken's Palatial Emporium to dress as befits a lady. She pays to ride first class that autumn afternoon, knowing she looks the part. Full skirt, cinched waist, gloves, crown. Boarding, she peeps the drunken white man smoking up the colored car. And no, she's not buying it. Her place is in the ladies' car. I know she wasn't born a hero, but once Ida B. Wells addresses what befits a lady who pays to ride first class, to drift into any which seat she selects, she's becoming one. Outfit be damned, she resists her ouster till her sleeves torn and the conductor's bleeding. She'll pull these threads until the whole threadbare lie of lynching unravels. Yeah, she was born in Holly Springs, Mississippi, but I'm gonna claim her for Tennessee. So I often read this poem when I feel like there are people in the audience who are still in decision-making mode and might need reinforcement. There are many poems celebrating celebrating mothers and motherhood, and this is not one of them. This is called The Blessings, and it has an epigraph by the amazing poet Nikki Finney. The things that I give birth to matter. The things that I give birth to other things. The blessings. I gave mine away. Not all, but the greater portion, some would say. I gave away the ready claim to goodness, to purpose. I gave away Mary, Sarah, and Isis. I gave away necessity and invention. I gave away a whole holiday, but I kept Billy. I gave away the chance to try and fail to have it all. I gave away the one thing that makes some men pay. I gave away the pedestal, the bouquet. I gave away Nell Wright, but I kept Sula Peace. I gave away the fine-tooth comb, but I kept the oyster knife. I gave away the first word the new mouth forms, the easiest to parlay across so many languages. Escaping the maw, I gave away the power to hold and be held in sway. But I kept Cho, Parton, Finney, Chapman, and Tomei. I gave away the Eve who left the garden that day, but kept the cool, green, shady, fruitless fruitful stay, the evening that did not fall away. I noticed that one of the postcards that Jen was designed. Who did the design? Thank you. Okay, I'm not going to be able to reproduce the names, but designers, you know who you are. Thank you. One of the postcards has the poem Nature Studies, and I thought I would just read that. It's a short poem. Nature Studies. First, it was a short piece of lupin passed around the group for us to smell its intoxicating wine. Then the toxic corn lily, from which he peeled leaf after leaf until nothing remained to reveal the illusion of stalk. Next, a still berryless sprig of mistletoe, plucked from the jolly parasitic kiss it had given a baby Jeffrey Pine's twiggy trunk, etc., etc. My heart snapped with each stem every time he stepped off the trail to return with a mystery in hand, a present conjugated into past tense. The tough thing, you want to like be enamored of nature and explore, and when we do that, we sometimes leave destruction in our wake. This is a poem. This is maybe the last poem I wrote for Suddenly We. And if you've read Harriet Jacobs' Incidents, or if you've read Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sowers, there are little tidbits in here for you. Or if you've just ever imagined needing to be on the run from what everybody expects or wants of you, this poem is also for you. It's called Destination. I became a fugitive the first time I sent the W of my wish flying into the dandelion's fro. That white cloud scattered in patterns of maybe, and my thoughts followed. Maybe north, maybe France, maybe my lips the color I was born with. I became a fugitive long before I donned the gear. By the time I slipped myself out the box of stockings and heels, my fugitivity was old hat. I became a fugitive the first time I looked around the house of could be worse and knew a garret could be better, knew alone could be better. Long before I stuffed seeds into a pillowcase, packed a bag, or earned enough mad money to be downright fucking furious, I could tell I was en route to absent. The first time I cast my dreams into a future the shape of my body, my intellect, my heart, I was gone. There was no other space that could contain me. There was only the squeeze into obedience's shadow and the spill of my elsewhere into watchful silence. I could act my age, behave myself, mind my P's and Q's, but the leaving was already going on. I became a fugitive the first time I looked at a wall and saw a window, when I first felt the bloody nubs where my wings, already spread, would grow. I called myself setting an alarm when I got up here and realized I set it for seconds instead of minutes. So I have 2 more poems from the book and then 3 new poems, and hopefully that's going to work out time-wise. I had mentioned that this book was a lot about visual art, and this is a poem that I'm going to read that was inspired during a sabbatical semester I spent, I guess in 2017 in Paris. And I haunted all the museums that I could visit while I was there. One of the last exhibitions that I visited was the Cy Twombly exhibition at Centre Pompidou that April. And there were 3 paintings I spent a lot of time sitting in front of, and they gave their names to the 3 sections of this poem. And it's a lot, just let it wash over you. It's called Expatria. 50 Days at Ilium, Shield of Achilles. A mythology begins with a question like, who are we? Where are we? What is red? Why paint? Why me, Lord? Why? A person who knows all the answers can only borrow a mythology like, I'm King Midas or I'm God. A painter can take a mythology and remake it so that it answers a new question, like Romare Bearden asking Odysseus, who are my we? And Cy Twombly asking Achilles, why are we still you? Painting the eye of the storm on a shield, cutting the trickster out of black and blue paper, and lashing him with glue to the mast of his last ship. The journey always rough, some miserable god under land, under sea, always looking for company. People always succumbing. The hero is the one who comes home, even if it's by process of elimination. A playwright can make a mythology ask, what's wrong with this song? Like Susan Laurie Parks asking Ulysses about coming home from the war. So why are you still a hero? And why are you still coming home from a war? And women die in wars too, even if it's not the expected death. And wait, that's not a question. But it's still a mythology if that's the only thing she knows for sure. Quattro stagioni, primavera, estate, autunno, inverno. A mythology can ask, why is autumn so beautiful? And why is winter, blight-stricken as it is, so arresting? A mythology, as opposed to a young person, can find autumn and winter much more striking than summer, sun-bleached summer, so legibly the scene of happiness that nothing else can really happen there. A mythology can see the blood in spring, the stages of growth, the kind of violence the body does to itself. It will never be this way again, yet it can't get on to the next moment fast enough. A mythology can ask, why does spring throw its arms out with abandon, even when it's abandoning itself? A mythology can ask, why is winter so much greener than spring, even clouded in white? The icicles trail as far down the evergreens as they can, but don't keep the wind from brushing snow and sun across the mountain on the same day. The inferno is always burning, women and men going up in flames. A poet can ask, why do daughters grow up by going down? Like Rita Dove asking Persephone, you think he's hot? All the while, autumn is answering the question about gorgeous rotting. Just magenta, green, brown, pink, yellow, red, violet, flying off the mythological canvas. Untitled, a gathering of time. A mythology of time can ask a subtle question. A sky blue can gather white clouds right before your eyes, holding them by threads of paint, stringing us along so that we miss the purple. The thunder is always further away than the whitening. A poet can grab a mythology of time that takes place over the dead bodies of letter after letter. The tongue lays them to rest, and they are covered by a sheet that falls far from the tree. A Cy Twombly can leave for Rome at 29 and still die an American artist, a hero who doesn't come home. A photographer can snag a mythology to turn her back on it, wearing black and steady gazing from a question that's a statement of the only thing she knows for sure. Like Carrie Mae Weems asking institutions like the British Museum when and where I enter, showing that she's the answer. Contrast, stark, the steps leading in, leading away, bright but heavy. The poet can ask a mythology, a question like, what is black in the museums of Paris? And again, the mythology pierces the clouds. It thunders so loud, but so late, that by then we've forgotten. We saw the lightning. We saw the lightning. We saw it, and it was not subtle. Thank you all. You're such a generous audience with your energy. You can feel the difference up here. I'm going to read the last poem, or the second to last poem in the book, which is about another artwork by Allison Sarr, the cover artist again. This piece is a larger-than-life public art installation, which you can see on the street in Harlem, New York, if you are ever in the area. And it's a statue, larger-than-life statue of Harriet Tubman that she called Swing Low. And what inspired the poem is partly just the beauty of the statue, which gets described just a little bit in the third stanza of this poem. But more important for the genesis of this was the fact that there was a little controversy when the statue was unveiled, so to speak. People complained that Harriet Tubman was facing the wrong way. Like they wanted her to face north, right? And Allison reminded us that Harriet Tubman went back many times, not facing the wrong way. This poem is called Facing South, after Allison Sarr, and two epigraphs. The first, as long as you are south of the Canadian border, you are south. That's Malcolm X. The second, now even the North Pole is south. That's me. Swing low, sweet charioteer. It's the wretched of the earth you're coming for, who will be found in the overlooked places, still bent to the soil and poisoned with it, still chained to each other's stink and sharing laughter like a virus, still working through illness and keeling over on the job, still going hungry to feed the owner's retirement, still smoothing the sheets the master poet sleeps on, still torn away from mother, brother, daughter, lover, earning maybe enough to keep them clothed, but not to keep them close. Oh, Harriet Chariot, swing lower than Maryland, swing wider, swing by the maquiladoras, swing by the detention centers, swing by the orange groves, swing by the slaughterhouses, swing by the bistros after lunch, the tables heavy on dishes and light on tips. Swing by Angola's cotton fields and the storefront church. Swing by Danville, by Oaxaca, by Manila. Swing by Flint. Swing by chain retailers' break rooms, fast food restaurants' kitchens, and every place with public in its name. We see you in Harlem with a dress full of roots and kin, a look of granite on your face, one hand open and the other a fist. You're mid-stride and headed our way. We're coming from deeper, broader, and further south, at times like you on foot, trudging towards a north that's receding like a glacier. From east and west, we're pushing towards you, seeking citizenship in your determination. Whichever way we're headed, we're facing the facts. There's no turning back now. Okay, three more. Um, Most of these are short. A poem that Allison and I collaborated on for a broadside in the wake of the Dobbs decision, I want to share with you. The broadside is, you can probably find it online. It was produced by Arion Press. It's amazing. Her artwork is the whole party as far as I'm concerned. But I wrote a poem coming out of our conversations about the fact that before the medical establishment um, corralled the sort of process of delivering children for what was at the time, and still maybe to some extent, a very male-dominated medical establishment. Um, Black and indigenous women knew how to help a woman um, make her own reproductive choices. So there's an epigraph for this poem that comes from Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs, a chapter where this titled A New Tide of Life, where she is referring to the person who claimed to own her, who had been sexually harassing her since she was 14 years old. He talked of the disgrace I had brought on myself, how I had sinned against my master and mortified my old grandmother. He intimated that if I had accepted his proposals, he, as a physician, could have saved me from exposure. Could have? Would have? Save me? Spare me. The old ways. The roots of men's meddling in such matters are tangled in the mess slavery made, marketing maternity. A girl could get her some gossypium, could chew the bark of cotton root to get her menses going again. Choose not to bear a child she might not get to raise. Her loss, her master's gain. Sweet Spanish moss to catch the blood called down between grateful thighs. Oh, uterine contractions. Oh, herbal concoction brewed to coax womb walls to release their lining along with its stowaway cargo. Oh, conjure woman, native or enslaved, capable and compassionate. This penultimate poem is in a form, I haven't talked about the forms. I've been reading Geigen's, I've been reading prose poems, all kinds of nonce forms. But I do want to mention that this one is in a form called the decima, which is a poetic form that comes from a song, a kind of song that moves in the Caribbean and South American Latinx cultures. There are decimas based in Cuba, based in Puerto Rico, I think Brazil, Ecuador. The form that I'm using is, I think, grounded largely in a Puerto Rican form. But if you really want to know, ask me, and I'll email you some links to where I sort of acquainted myself with this. I read one on Poetry Daily and fell in love with it, so I wanted to write one. It has rhyme, which you might hear, and it has repeating lines. The first stanza, 4 lines, they're going to come back at different moments. And I guess the only other thing I need to say is, do you all remember still Tamir Rice? Do you all know who Amber Nicole Thurman was? You may remember hearing in the fall about a woman who was denied care after her miscarriage because it would be considered potentially an abortion in Georgia, and she died of sepsis. Her name is Amber Nicole Thurman. This poem is for them. It's called Decima on the Fabric of Time, Sirius Polaris. The play of light moving through infinite darkness creates large-scale rhythms. Others, deep buried, our own hearts generate. The fabric of time is black, a veil through which a brown-skinned boy goes unseen or might blend in with shadows that attack white imaginations. Track the second hand, the 11 hops between Tamir and heaven. How black child's play compares to the play of light. Moving through life, black's fast at 12 years even. The fabric of time's a shroud that drags everything out, circulates infinite darkness, creates around black people a cloud that justice isn't allowed to freely enter. We count the hours sepsis had to mount its assault before the care Amber needed came. We dare to hold her lost black years paramount. The fabric of black time folds, a brutal physics that places their 2 lives theft, not in stasis, but proximate to the holds of 18th century ships. Folds not what those captured had coming, yet some held on to their humming long enough to regain, keep large-scale rhythms. Others, deep wounded, hailed time by succumbing. The fabric of black time pleats, expands, contracts, are someday otherworldly, far away, dog star, north star. The now meets our ancient past, and light eats the distance. Freedom dreams wait, buried. Our own heartbeats generate the insistent cadence. Thread time, unravel it. Our dead, still alive within us, pulsate. Thank you all. And because it is February, Valentine's Day month, and because the point of poetry is not only truth, but sustenance, I'm going to end with a sonnet called Black Love. And thank you again for your time. Black love. My love is black, though my love is not black. Think the darkness cradling the Milky Way. Imagine quick light flowing down the back of my throat, glowing. I swallow the day. My love is black, an absorbing array of colors. Gold yolk escaping the cracked shell, a shiny silver moon coin to play, a juicy peach, plump plums, cup of cognac. My love is black, the only way I know to live. Now fierce and demanding, now free and unpossessed. So for my magnet, my love becomes steel. Then for my butterfly, will not a flower but a whole field be? My love and my blackness together go. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, can we another round for Evie? That was beautiful. I gotta be a good timekeeper too. Here. Shh. Yeah. It's so good to see you.
Likewise.
I was just reminded, sometimes when you may know this as a professor, teacher. I don't know, you feel like there's this convincing that you have to do around poetry, why it's beloved and all that. And just listening to you, I'm reminded that, yeah, I don't have to do any of that. I know. We know why we're here. That's good. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. The hardest part is getting started, I think. I think I'll just go to Suddenly We a little bit because it starts with this calligram, very prominent calligram. And it's made up, there's this visual we, but it's made up of U's, and then it ends with a U that's made up of we's, as in the words. And I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about your vision of the collective, and maybe not just in the book, but maybe beyond that in the culture, in this moment, wherever you want to go with that.
Whew. I mean, I I love that that poem speaks to you and to people. Um, there's something about, again, visual art that may feel more immediate sometimes than art in language, because we all know as word people that we have to interpret poetry and we can just respond to visual art. And so um, one of the things I wanted that poem to do was to borrow from Alma Thomas, a visual artist whose piece, Starry Night and the Astronauts, I just love with a deep passion. Her brush strokes, I was like, what can I do in poetry that will have the same, or even just like a tenth of the kind of impact that I get from seeing her create this night sky and this little kind of unidentified object floating along almost off the canvas. Um, she creates this whole with these tiny little brush strokes that if you get up close, you can see each one of them. But from a distance, you just get the whole, right? And I began to realize that desire to write in conversation with that painting and that aspect of her work was part and parcel of what I was trying to talk about in Suddenly We, that there has to be a way that we can get the perspective on ourselves where we can understand ourselves as each being that like individual brushstroke, bringing something that is important and necessary to the whole, but that what we are together is what's beautiful, right? It's each of us bringing our thing to the whole. And that's kind of how I'm trying to navigate when I think about collectivity, that as someone who kind of was influenced by the Black Arts movement, coming up in the wake of, but still in the lifetimes of people who were writing and working from that tradition, there was, in the context of African American culture, there was a dogma that, that unity had to be like this, completely solid, undifferentiated whole. But I think that I, am interested in a different kind of understanding, one that's grounded in solidarity, which is about coming together. It's not solidity, it's solidarity, which is, it's the holding on to each other and the choosing to hold on to each other across whatever distance or difference lies between us. So that's some of the ways that poem sort of leads into the vision that I was trying to tease out in the book.
Yeah, actually, listening to you now, I realize that that is the starting poem. But even if we go back a couple pages to the epigraphs, there's this kind of conversation, a collective, but some different takes on the we, So you have like Alexis Pauline Gumbs, Bernice Reagan, Nathaniel Mackey, all these different takes. So I appreciate too that it's not coded. So you leave us some crumbs about where we're gonna move, along that, within that journey. So, yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you. I do a lot of epigraphs for the book and the poems, and so it means a lot to know that people don't just kind of gloss over them.
Mm-hmm.
They are the breadcrumbs. I try to leave my stars in traces on the page.
There's also like a really great, magnificent wordplay, punning, winking, coding of a different kind, not in this book, but really across your work. I mean, I guess some examples from this book are in those headings like we be coming and going, we uppity and down, so on, humor, obviously. What are like some of your early memories of language play, like maybe within culture, within family, of course, is included in that. Like moments where you get it, like either what grown folks say, or I know you're a Prince fan, so when the lights go on about what those Prince lyrics really mean, they mean one thing at a certain age and they mean something else later. So essentially, like, how does language, the puzzle of it, the pleasure of it, the play, like manifest in your writing practice, in your work?
Ooh, you've said all the things in the question. It's real. I mean, because you're brilliant. Someone asked me once my like earliest sort of encounter with poetry, and um, and I said, I think very honestly, it was Mother Goose, right? Um, the also the hand games that you play, um, the the songs that you sing for Ring Around the Rosie. I mean, Ring Around the Rosie. We all know now that it's about the plague. But it can also just be something that you sing. I came into language with games kind of at the center of my my fascination, and have come to understand the games sometimes have a lot more weight. They have high stakes, but the law is a language game. If you don't believe me, turn on the news. Um, I think religion in some ways is a language game, different stakes again, but I think about Norbesi Philip and the way Zong was her way of working through, in part, it was many things, but it's her way of working through the idea that, I mean, again, going back to the law says something is something else. The magic of that, right? And that she said she likened it to the Bible saying that this is my blood, right? That the saying of it making something happen. Um, so that that range of language play from, like you say, you know, listening into the grown folks, um, Sesame Street and Electric Company, all the way up to things like religion and law, knowing that the better I can sort of, the stronger my muscles are for parsing and playing with language, the better fortified I am to move around the world. That that's kind of like the spectrum that I play on in writing my poetry. Sometimes I'm trying to see if I can make something happen. There was a poem I was thinking about reading that's you can find it online. It's called Job Prescription, and it ends with the idea that poetry may not change the world, but it might change you. And that's a lot of what I'm trying to do with my poems is to pull at some emotion or some memory or something that you envision or hear until you find your thinking shifted, because that first thread is being put in conversation with another thread, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's all a game, but sometimes it's serious. And even when it is serious, you can laugh.
No, because you're brilliant. You've already covered some of the things that I was gonna ask you. No, that's good. That's beautiful. That's great. I think I want to ask you to talk a little bit more about um, how the visual elements are working in your poems, right? I know that you've like been in this territory across many books, right? There's a lot of conversations with photographs. There's actual sketches in this one. Ombrizel, you know, there's a lot happening there. When did you first start experimenting with those kinds of poems? And how does it say a poem like The Hand part to that? How does that like allow you to, for the subject matter maybe in a way that a non-pictorial or non-handwritten poem would?
You know, I would put, there's a lot of emphasis on the visual in this book, but Melissa mentioned that, you know, Prince shows up a lot in some of my books, and I at this point I just want to put music and visual art together on the table as, like I was saying earlier, that we see a painting and we feel able to just respond to it, and we hear music and we have that response, and we remember the response that we had the first time we heard it, or that summer that we listened to it over and over again, or whatever it is. Those really visceral kinds of reactions to the visual and to the oral are what I'm trying to kind of recreate in my poems, and use those references to pull you in. And now I just realized I lost what the question was. I was going somewhere with this.
Just thinking about working in that way versus not, so if you're
Oh,
not like
right.
in that visual or musical space, like drawing from that, like what's the actually you are answering it. You are.
I knew I was on the track, but I lost the thread. I did. So yeah, the poems that are sort of taking advantage of the space of the page are like the poems that are citing song lyrics that you should actually sing if you're reading them, because I would sing them if I were reading them. Um, they're like touchstones, emotional touchstones, and they allow the art made with language to also be made with music, or also be made with line, or visual line, or shape at the same time. And so you can be pulled into the poem at a specific place, ideally much faster that way. And so sometimes it's like a shortcut, except it takes a long way around to get there in the making, but maybe ideally for the viewer, reader, listener, it's a shortcut.
Segue into form. Maybe this is like for the students a little bit too, and yeah. I mean, I do want to say that definitely you have to be like one of the greatest poets today, like capturing, archiving the political moments of our time, like whether it's lockdowns, Black Lives Matter, elections, and you give this historical context for these movements, right? Often through this incredible range of forms. Recent book on fire. And you seem like very at home in this place too. But to say that maybe suggests that it's easy, but we know it's like not necessarily easy. Like, you talked about it a little bit just now, like that, but could you open up like maybe your pathways, describe your pathways to formal invention, and, again, thinking about the students, do you have any advice for them? Like, how does the subject not get swallowed up by the form or overcome by the form? How do you wrestle with those things? Balance those two? I don't know. I'm not even sure the best way to put that, but
That's a great question, though. I mean, am I allowed to ask you all? Can you raise your hand if you like writing in form? I'm just curious. Okay. Okay. Hands kept going up. And so if you hate it, I also, I understand. Um, I have had okay, so no one here at Smith would do this, least of all Yona. When I was an undergrad poetry concentrator, I had an instructor who made me and the rest of my cohort write a different poem in a different form 5 days a week for an entire month. from the epigram, the little two-line couplet, the couplet, the witty little toss off, right, kind of thing, to, blank verse, sonnets, you name it, terza rima, we did the whole thing. And so I came out of undergrad hating form. But, and I don't know if it's because of that, but I will say that because I knew how to do it, it was there for me when I came to a point where I wanted to do it. And what made me want to do it was seeing the many poets, writing in the then late 20th century and now 21st century, who understand that form is their, it's structure. It's not a prison, it's a support. And if your form is fighting against the poem, then it's just not the right form. It's not form that's wrong, it's that form that might be wrong. And the more forms you know, the more things you have to go to, the more ideas for what kind of support structure will lift your words, shape them, help you let your reader know where you want them to go even before they've actually read it. I mean, because form is also what you see. You can kind of spot a sonnet, 14 lines becomes easy to see after a while, right? A prose poem announces itself immediately. And we go into them with a kind of already a different mode of receiving the language than when we see something that's on the left margin, for example, and short lines versus long lines. All of that, the more forms you are aware of and familiar with and get comfortable playing around in, the more you'll be able to find the form that's working with your poem, as opposed to feeling like it's a constraint, but it shouldn't feel like a corset, now I'm thinking lifts and supports. Y'all don't know what I'm talking about. But Yona knows.
How does that, well, okay, I'll rewind now. In terms of like, I don't know, collaborations with other artists. You mentioned Allison Sarr, the friendships that come out of that. What are the rules? Like when you are participating in these collaborations, like what rules are you establishing, with the other artists? Is it more organic? Maybe there's no rules. I don't want to, impose that on you. I'm just curious. How does that work?
I mean, that is one of the joys. Anyone who makes things knows that part of the terror is like the blank page or the blank canvas or the blank whatever before you get started. But when you're collaborating, it's a conversation before it's anything else, right? And then maybe one person will venture forth into language or into a stroke or a sketch or something, and then it's a back and forth, and it's just a real joy to be creating in company. So that's the first thing I would say. But I think the rule for collaboration is to talk about what you both want, or what you all want, depending on how big that is. It's it's a thing that you establish going in, and I don't think that there's one rule that would work for everyone. You want to find where your collaborators' boundaries are, what you both want to achieve. Like, why are you working together in the first place, and how can you best manifest what what that what what's overlapping in your visions, and then still leave room for you to have, your own individual brushstrokes again, right? So the conversation, Allison had collaborated with other poets before me, like Harriet Mullen and I think Samia Bashir, and so she already was very comfortable and really opened the door with just such generosity, such openness to whatever my input was, and now I love working with her. And I crave it. So it's addictive. That's what I'll say.
So you have this law background, incredible scholarly work, essays on poems. Of course, you write your own poems. Um, how do you navigate those areas of your life? How do you know when something is poetry material, when it's essay, scholarly? How does that work? Are you working on these things at the same time? Process.
Everything, everything, everywhere, all at once. I, I don't think I have really a struggle with what's happening where. Um, I think a great fortune of my career as it's unfolded is that I've been able to kind of follow the threads of my intellectual inquiry in both genres, if you will, in critical prose and in poetry. I think of poetry as, after what Audre Lorde has taught us about um, um, thinking about poetry as the way in which we find names for that which hasn't been yet thought. This is a very clumsy paraphrase, but um, it's, I think of poetry as a mode of theorizing. I think of criticism of other poets' work as a kind of theoretical inquiry into, what is possible, what what is possible for me to understand about blackness or gender or um, the environment or whatever it is as I'm reading this poet, and as I'm learning from somebody else, from like that close reading and painstaking kind of parsing of what someone else is doing, I find myself automatically thinking, okay, am I agreeing with this? Am I agreeing with the way it's being expressed? And I'm already thinking, okay, what would I be writing if I were writing about this? Is this moving me to an idea to add to or to diverge from what I've been reading? Can I send a love letter back to this idea, or like it's just response. It's all conversation for me. So the one thing I don't do is very much is like try to write about or analyze or teach my own work. That I'm allergic to the very idea. I don't want to understand how my poetry works in that way. But I love understanding how other people's poetry works, and then seeing what I can create that just carries the conversation forward. I'm a big believer in tradition, as someone who loves Shakespeare, loves like John Donne, loves the poetry that you find in the Old Testament. I love poetry of all kinds. I love haiku, so like poetry from all various parts of the world. And I just want to be a part of that web. I want to be a part of it. I want to share it. It's like this whole conversation for me is just like I'm a spider throwing out webs and trying to stick them to you all. And when I see you next, however many years from now, it'll just be like, oh, I see. We're still connected through this web of art and ideas.
We were talking earlier about intuition, and now my intuition is saying, that's the place to end. We're going to stop right there. That was perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.